Before I start the video, I would like to give a massive shout out to my Patreons who have been supporting my channel. If you would like to check out my Patreon and receive early access to some very exciting videos coming soon, then please click the link in the description below. Hello there, and welcome back to the Just a Nerd podcast. And today I am joined by a very special guest. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Will. You may know me online as Mr. Tardis or Trilby or the multiple other names that I've gone by because I'm terrible at brand management. And I'm a Doctor Who YouTuber slash live stream who is also a freelancer in the TV and film industry.
Well, thank you for coming on today, Will. It's really cool to have you on here. So let's get the big thing out of the way. You're obviously a fan of Doctor Who, I assume.
It has been noted. You've read between the lines and you've sussed me out. Yes.
Yes, and with this assumption, when did you first become a fan of the show?
So I was one of the casual, normal people who got on board when the show was revived in 2005. I didn't watch Rose on broadcast, but I saw the marketing. I saw the photos of Christopher Eccleston and Billie Piper on the big billboards and the banners and stuff with the TARDIS doors opening the wrong way. So I was aware that something was happening on BBC on Saturday nights, but it wasn't until the week after when my family sat me down and said, "Hey, there's this show that we think you're gonna like. We've recorded the first episode from last week on VHS, which is a form of video
Wow.
storage from for those of you who might pre DVDs." So we watched Rose and then immediately went to The End of the World on broadcast. And I remember I didn't want to be there. I'd rather be upstairs playing Smash Brothers or whatever I was doing in 2005.
That's respectful.
Yes, the important things in life. But by the time we got to the bin that was stalking Mickey outside of his car, I was hooked. If I could go behind the sofa, which I couldn't because it was against the wall, if I could have got behind the sofa, I would have done then. And then from then on, I was completely hooked and captivated. And at that time, I didn't really know what I wanted to do in terms of like future careers or jobs or whatever.
Yeah.
But after watching The End of the World, there was during the credits a ident appeared saying, "Hey, if you want to know how the episode was made, go on to BBC Three." So as the rest of my family left the room, I switched over to BBC Three and watched Doctor Who Confidential. And
Yeah.
from then I realized, oh, people made this. These are jobs, and Eccleston's actually an actor who I will grow to love over the next few years. So from then on, I realized, even if I didn't know specifically what part of TV I wanted to work in, that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of relate to you with that because I've just I'm about to graduate and do a master's in film and television production.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, Doctor Who Confidential was one of the influences that I had because it was really cool to like learn stuff from behind the scenes, learn how some iconic scenes were produced and stuff like that. And back then as well, with the amount of content we were getting, I think at the time I was definitely too young to appreciate it all. But we had the main show, we had the confidential episodes, and then from 2006 onwards, we had the Sarah Jane Adventures.
Yeah.
Had Torchwood as well. Like so many cool things. And I want to ask, did you watch the spin-off shows when they aired?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I absolutely did. Yes. Sarah Jane Adventures, totally Doctor Who, Torchwood. Yeah, I watched it all. Because what was wonderful, I think, and I can't be the only one who feels this like as well. When the show came back in 2005, the BBC and Rusty Davis did a terrific job of not selling this as a whole new show. They were like, yeah, this is like a reincarnation of it, but there's this like 30 years of history that's come before us televised, including a movie. So there was the Legend Continues book, which I got that Christmas, which had all the information about everything from the previous stories and all the previous Doctors. Confidential had interviews with all of the actors, and they played classic series clips.
Yeah.
So even when The Parting of the Ways was broadcast and series one was over, you knew that there was still a lot out there to
Yeah.
fill up your time before David Tennant turned up on
Yeah.
Christmas Day. So, all of the books they released and all the DVDs from To Entertain that was starting to fill the shelves. So, yeah, I consumed everything that I could in terms of what was new, but also
Yeah.
what was old as well. But yeah, day one, I was there for Torchwood, Sarah Jane Adventures as well.
So it's funny that you mentioned Classic Who. And I want to know, because I'm very curious, what was the first serial that you watched when you dived into that range?
So my first exposure to Classic Who actually happened several years earlier when I was like 6 or 7, and
Okay.
I was at my grandma's house, and I don't know what channel it was on. I don't know when in the year it was, but I remember it was the cliffhanger ending to the Sontaran Experiment Part One.
Oh, okay.
And I had no idea what it was. I just walked into the room and the TV was on. I think my brother might have been watching it or someone else. I don't know. And the Lynx takes off. No, Sarah thinks it's Lynx, but it's Strax. I forget. No, what's the Sontaran's name in the Sontaran experiment? Either way, they're all the same.
Yeah.
Um, he takes his helmet off, and I just ran out the room screaming and terrified. I was like, "Oh, what's this? I have no idea." So that was my actual first exposure. But it wasn't until years later when the Peter Cushing movies were on during like a bank holiday weekend, and I started to connect the dots over the years. But my first story when I got the DVDs after Series 1 came out was Revelation of the Daleks and Earthshock.
I
It
mean,
was
that's some stories to.
yeah,
Yeah.
basically, I knew that the heavy hitters were the Dalek ones and the Cybermen, and I didn't want to watch that old black and white stuff. I couldn't possibly. So I wanted the '80s stuff, and those were the two that I first dived into. I did order, like I think this was when Amazon was first starting out as well. What I thought was DVDs of the Hartnell Dalek stories,
Okay.
but then delivered through the door with the Peter Cushing films. So that was my mistake, but that was how I watched those for the first time. So yeah, I started with the heavy hitters, the Dalek stories and the Cybermen ones, and then sort of like branched out when Sarah Jane came back and they had that Hand of Fear DVD release. I got that as well. Yeah, I wasn't able to watch all of them because there was only so much time and so much money that a 13, 14-year-old me had.
Yeah.
But I tried my best to go through the best bits or the most memorable or most talked about stories.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good explanation for your foray into Classic Who. I mean, the first one I started with was Genesis of the Daleks, and
Oh
I
yeah.
made a mistake when I first watched Christopher Eccleston's series. And my dad always used to go on about Tom Baker because that's when he first started watching
Mm.
Doctor Who. And then I got confused thinking Christopher Eccleston was Tom Baker. So I think it
Yeah.
was for Christmas, instead of asking for series one, I asked for a Tom Baker Doctor Who DVD, and that's the one I ended up getting. And I was like,
Mm.
wait, this isn't the one I watched on the TV, but I was hooked anyway,
Yeah.
despite the different format and stuff. And I feel like Genesis of the Daleks was a good jumping on point, and then I did what you did, similar, jumping on with the heavy hitters, stuff like Earthshock, Remembrance of the Daleks as well.
Yeah.
It was really cool to get into Classic Who. But I am intrigued because you have obviously over time, there's been more episodes of New Who. You've jumped on to more Classic Who as well. If you had to pick one story from each to be your favorite, what would it be and why?
Yeah, yeah, this is tough because there's just so much of it, and so much of it is so different as well.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think there's a single wrong answer to this question, unless you say like Twin Dilemma and In the Forest of the Night. Then I'll say no, red flag, red flag. But, but I know someone whose like favorite story is Fear Her, and you know what? More power to them. Absolutely, this is
Yeah.
a council axe and a council van. I'm reporting you to the council. But for for me, I loved in the revived series. Probably Midnight is the favorite singular episode. Maybe Heaven Sent as well, but
Yeah.
Midnight is such a wonderful it takes a very egotistical and big-headed doctor like the 10th Doctor, and it weaponizes that against him, and with no companion on that bus to back him up.
Yeah.
And David Tennant's performance is, I think it's probably, along with The End of Time, probably the best he's ever been. Even in all of his other terrific roles, I think that is the best acting he has ever done. and Leslie Sharp's amazing as well. The whole cast is great.
Yeah.
And yeah, and the fact that they do so much with so little, and yeah, the editing, the sound, it just all comes together for Midnight, which I think was kind of almost like a write-off when they were making it. They were like, okay, we need to do this small budget restrained story before we get to the epic trilogy that ends series 4. But no, they really delivered with Midnight. And for classic, it's a cliche, but I'm going with the Caves of Androzani, where
Oh,
for very similar reasons, where it takes like what who's meant to be a pretty kind and insecure doctor
yeah.
and places him in an environment that has no need for like someone like him, and the fact that he's only just met Perry in the story beforehand, forgetting Big Finish and novels and stuff, like for the TV show proper, he's only just met this young American student, and he goes through the ends of the earth to try and rescue her because it's just the right thing to do.
Yeah.
It's so well directed. The music is like genuinely chilling, and the performances are just like so above what you'd expect from that era. It's so moody, and I contrast it with everything that's surrounding it,
Yeah.
like all the overlit sets of the John Nathan Turner era, and even like the next story, the Twin Dilemma. You can kind of see how, it's the same production team, but something for that story was just. I don't know what was in the water, but it really comes together for that one as well. And it's Peter Davison's best performance as the
Yeah.
Doctor as well. Like
Yeah.
no question.
It's funny that you mentioned, the case of Androzani, Heaven Sent at Midnight, because these are all episodes that really explore, the Doctor's,
Mm,
personality. Because regardless of who they are, who's playing the role, there's always that same, set of, like a personality where the Doctor does always try to do the right thing, and yeah, that the Doctor does always try to save someone. Obviously, in Heaven Sent, it's set after Clara's death, and you
mm.
get to see like the Doctor really, pushed to the extreme, and obviously, hell bent. We don't really talk about that one that much, but it yeah, like those examples do really explore, the Doctor and what it means to be the Doctor. And as you said, in terms of TV continuity, the Doctor had just met Perry,
Mm.
and then the Doctor decided to give her the antidote, and then that led to a very different regeneration, a very different start. What were your thoughts on the twin dilemma? I may as well get this one out of the way as well, since it's been brought up.
No, so to be fair, I've not seen the Twin Dilemma for a long time. It's
Yeah,
been several years, but yeah, it's the I think that Colin Baker, you can see as a performance, as an actor,
yeah,
he's doing a great job.
yeah,
And I think that maybe in the classic series, Colin Baker is maybe the best like actor in terms of just raw talents to play the Doctor in the classic series, along with
yeah,
maybe Patrick Troughton. Like, and you can't fault Colin Baker as a person either. He just seems like a lovely guy. Like it was like a wrong place, wrong time type deal. There's been a lot of like behind the scenes talk about whether or not Eric Saywood was trying to like sabotage the show or whatever. I don't want to
yeah,
get too deeply into that sort of speculation, but you kind of believe it with stories like the Twin Dilemma, where
yeah,
it's everything Caves of Androzani isn't. It's overlit. The direction is a little bit pedestrian, and
yeah,
it's just another quarry. Whereas the Caves of Androzani was another quarry, but it had like a texture to it and
yeah.
was shot in a really interesting way. I don't know if on its own Twin Dilemma is like the worst Doctor Who story, but I think it's that contrast. It's going straight from Caves to Twin Dilemma that makes the difference so potent. Especially like going from Genesis of the Daleks to Revenge of the Cybermen.
Yeah.
Like Revenge of the Cybermen's probably not the worst story, but it's the polar opposite in terms of approach, and that contrast is really noticeable.
Yeah, of course. And forgive me because I can't, when it comes to classic seasons, I can't always remember, what serials were included. But wasn't the Twin Dilemma included at the end of Peter Davison's last season?
It was, yeah, it was. There's even like the BBC idents that still exist, and you can watch on the DVDs. Like when Caves of Androzani, the credits roll, it says, "Now tune in next week for new Doctor Colin Baker." So that, yeah, it was an interesting approach to like marketing and promotion. I think that because the Twin Dilemma was so different and such a big step down, it ended up backfiring. But I respect them for trying at least. Like I
Yeah.
think we're going to see something. Like we see things that are quite similar even with the revived series, where a actor regenerates and then 2 or 3 months later, you see them in a Christmas special. I think we're going to be seeing that this year as well. Tennant's going to leave at the end of the 60th
Yeah.
anniversary special, and then maybe 3 or 4 weeks later, we're seeing Shooty. So it makes sense in a sort of like promotional capacity way, keep the momentum going. But I think it was the wrong story to end that season with.
Yeah. I remember I was at a Comic Con panel before, and Colin Baker was speaking briefly about the twin dilemma, and he thought it probably wasn't, the best episode to obviously to have at the end of the season, because he obviously saw a controversial portrayal of the Doctor, with that scene that everyone talks about. And he thought that it probably wasn't the best to do because, not to misquote him, but he didn't fully agree with the fact that, yeah, that was like the last image of his Doctor for a while, until the new season dropped, which I do really agree with him, to be honest, because, yeah, it was a bit of a it probably did leave a sour note for audiences at the time, and those that were affected, they probably just automatically thought that was going to be his portrayal of the Doctor, which is a shame.
Well, something similar happened for the beginning of season 4 when Hartnell regenerates at the end of the 10th planet.
Yeah.
And that's the second serial of that series. And then
Yeah.
next week, it's Power of the Daleks with Patrick Troughton. And that's regarded as one of the best stories of the 60s. I think in a recent Doctor Who magazine poll, it was like maybe in the top 3, maybe even number 1, I can't recall. But at the time, reviews for Power of the Daleks were scathing because they were like, "Who's this man? He's just an imitator of Hartnell." He's like, So I think there is something to be said of the what do you call it? The gestation period for change for the casual audience member. This is just something that we'll watch on every Saturday and then we'll tune out for the rest of the week. This is So I think for that general average audience viewer, which probably doesn't exist, the average viewer, but I hope you know what I mean.
Yeah, of course.
So I think for that, an approach where it's a week to week, including the regeneration in the next story, that's not the best approach to go for. But we know that in hindsight, of course, that you don't know until you've tried it.
Yeah, and I do want to ask you this, because we've just been obviously speaking about a mid-season or end of season regeneration. With the modern version of the show, it's mainly stuck to the format of either with Eccleston, it was at the end of the series, and then Tennant appeared at the Christmas special, or we have a regeneration during a special, which has been like the mainstay. Would you like to see something happen where the Doctor does regenerate in the middle or at the start of a series? Do you feel like that would work now, or do you feel like it would be probably not the right thing?
No, that's really interesting. I think it would be really interesting in terms of just a pure surprise.
Yeah.
But it would depend on if they marketed it or if they were like, okay, we're mid-series, but something's going to happen. But there's something to be said about like this sounds so strange, but like the ritual of like a regeneration where the actor themselves as well gets their big shining moment, their goodbye. I know that's something that's mainly been happening, and that's something more for recent, like the revived series of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
But I think that it makes it fair to the actors as well, that they're not just like Colin Baker, like, oh, surprise, you've hit your head on the Tardis console, and now Sylvester McCoy's in a wig regenerating. Like, it's something that we want to make it equal to all of the Doctors if we can.
Yeah.
And I think that a mid-series regeneration, unless it was like a big mid-series finale that gave them that, they just happen to regenerate mid-series as opposed to the finale, that might be the best way to go for it. But it's like with the Power of the Doctor, it's a story generally that I really like, but as a Jodie Whittaker regeneration final story, it doesn't do her much justice. She's gone for half of that story, which is a bit disappointing. I think her final scenes are wonderful, but making her like she's unconscious in like a glass tube for like half of that story's runtime, it's not really very befitting of her final story, in my opinion. I think the rest of the elements of that story are really strong, but that particular thing, it feels like that Jodie never quite got the proper ending story that she maybe deserved. Along like Eccleston, his best performance is probably in The Parting of the Ways, or one of his best. David Tennant in The End of Time, etc. Whereas Jodie never really got to shine in that final story. So yeah, I know I'm rambling at this point. It's what I do, but
No, it's
yeah,
good. It's good to hear.
yeah, but it's a really interesting question though, and it would just be a case of, do you hide it and do you still treat it like a regeneration story proper for the sake of the actor and that incarnation?
Yeah, because I guess the benefit of marketing a regeneration, obviously, because you want to draw viewers in.
Mm,
Like a lot of people were talking about the power of the Doctor, because for the general audiences, people like that aren't like us that were interested in the leaks. Where for us it was kind of like, yeah, we were expecting David Tennant, but for general audiences they were like, okay, I'm guessing we're going to see Shooty Gatwa at the end of this, and then they were completely blown away that
yeah,
David Tennant was appearing. But just in terms of, of a regeneration story, people are tuning in because they want to see, the beginning of a new era. Because
mm,
Doctor Who is a show that is constantly changing over the years, and I think that's obviously a benefit of marketing a regeneration, but again, a surprise one. Because obviously, a lot of stuff can be done in studio, but would they be able to hide a mid-season regeneration, especially with like public filming?
yeah. It's especially tough because for people like big actors like Jodie Whittaker who are like really in demand. Like as soon as she finished Power of the Doctor, she took like maternity leave. She had
Yeah,
another kid, and then she went back straight to the convention circuit, and now she's doing a high-end TV drama again for the
yeah,
BBC, for one in for Paramount Plus, I think.
yeah,
So
yeah,
so when an actor regenerates or their doctor regenerates, the actor doesn't literally burst into flames. That would be very
yeah.
impressive. But once they've regenerated and they're available,
Yeah,
they need to let their agents and other companies know that they are now available for work.
yeah,
So it becomes the boring paperwork side of the industry, the business. But it's they want to take the hype and the momentum of being a doctor and
yeah,
then go on to other things. So it will be very difficult to hide it because at some point there's going to be like a CV or something, or even just like a press statement saying Jodie Whittaker or whichever actor Shooty is going to be in this upcoming series. How has he found time to film that? Maybe he's not doing Doctor Who anymore, and then the cat's kind of out of the bag there. It's where the fandom dreams sort of clash with the
yeah,
reality of making a TV show, and that it's made by people who want to go on to another job after they've been the Doctor.
yeah. Because at the end of the day, like acting is obviously work, and people need to work to obviously earn money, so to survive and all that sort of stuff. And
Mm.
yeah, because at the end of the day, Doctor Who, the production on a series, it does take a long time, especially the filming process and stuff like that. And like a mid-season regeneration, yeah, like as you said, it's a really cool idea, but obviously, with the reality of how things, filmed, and obviously the post-production process and stuff like that, it does take, well, it's a year, I think, in
Mm.
total. So it's a
Yeah,
long
yeah.
time.
I
It's
think
a
like
long
even
time.
Flux was like 18 months for
Yeah,
6 episodes plus specials, which
yeah,
yeah, it's also I think maybe a bit unfair to the newcomer as
yeah,
well because they want to make their stamp, they want to make a good first impression,
yeah,
and if you've got audience members who are reeling from maybe someone's favorite or one of their favorite doctors leaving, and this newcomer is now has turned up out of nowhere and you don't have that series break or that good amount of closure for the previous one, that can negatively impact the next Doctor and how how fans respond to them and stuff like that. So yeah, I think the current system is fair, even
yeah.
if it does mean that there's some predictability to it.
Yeah, that's completely fair. And I feel like, yeah, we have gone in depth with the process of regeneration, classic and new Who. We've kind of got this nailed down. But let's move on and talk a little bit about yourself, because you've obviously, you've got a YouTube channel,
Mm.
which is very interesting. And I want to know, what was your inspiration for starting the YouTube channel?
So yeah, I've been watching Doctor Who since it came back in 2005, and through the Eccleston and David Tennant era. And then Matt Smith comes in, Stephen Moffat takes over, and I'm starting to learn a bit more about the like inner workings of how the show is made, and I'm engaging more with the fandom on like Facebook groups and watching YouTube reviews and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and forums and such. At Gallifrey Base, I was a member there for a while. Worst decision I ever made. But when it comes to the fan response to those early stories, I saw an awful lot of negativity because there was a lot of people who were really attached to Rusty Davis's approach. They didn't like Matt Smith. And then the new Daleks turned up in Victory of the Daleks.
Oh,
And
okay.
yes, and then fandom exploded a bit. And I thought that the Dalek designs themselves are actually pretty good. And but what I'd do is that I'd go onto a forum and then I'd do a post, I'd defend it, I'd say my piece, and then it would just get buried because posting on the internet is like throwing a message in a bottle into a
Yeah.
sea of messages and bottles. Like it gets lost in the shuffle, and I decided, okay, so let's change tact here because I'm not actually having a conversation or a proper talk about my personal defense, which sounds a bit egotistical, but I think you kind of need a bit of an ego to start any sort of like platform or channel or
Yeah.
anything. Just a bare minimum amount, which I'll acknowledge. And so I set up my YouTube channel with Windows Movie Maker and a cheap £8 PC World microphone, which sounded terrible and was terrible. And I did my review of Victory of the Daleks about a few days after it was broadcast. And from then on, I got a good response to it and started doing reviews of the rest of Series 5. And here we are now.
Oh no, that's really cool to learn of the origins of your YouTube channel because obviously since then you've gone on to do a lot of things with it. You've done a lot of very interesting videos. You've got a really cool fan base as well. I believe you've got over 30,000 subscribers, if I'm
Yeah,
correct.
yes. Hopefully, we'll be at maybe 33,000 by the end of next month. Which, yeah,
That would be pretty cool. And for those tuning in and not subscribed to Mr. Tardis, please help him reach his goal because I'm sure you'd appreciate that a lot.
that would be great. Thank you.
But let's talk about where I joined your little fan base because I discovered your channel in late 2019 with the Dalek Sember series, which I thought was a really cool and interesting little idea for a series. Reviewing every Dalek story, which I thought was really cool. Um, what was like your I like sorry, what was your inspiration for doing something like that?
Um, so I can't actually remember what made me think, yeah, this sounds like a good idea, something I could do. But I was definitely inspired by people like Cinemassacre with their Monster Madness series, where they do a horror film every day in October.
Yeah,
What I think one of the main inspirations was actually a creator called Ilnige, who is like a big Pokemon fan. He also does like Pokemon themed like covers of
yeah,
songs, and he did a series called Pokemonth where he went through all of the Pokemon movies. And even though I'm not like interested in like the Pokemon series, or at least I wasn't at the time, I really liked the videos and how they were constructed and formatted, and I really liked his approach to it. And from then on, I sort of like, oh, maybe I could do something like this, quite similar to Doctor Who. Well,
yeah.
what would I do? And then I was going through like crunching the numbers, and at that time, I realized that there were 24 Dalek stories that I could do
Yeah.
if you like included Mission to the Unknown and Dallas Master Plan as one thing. Oh, so I could do something where I review all of the stories in like 10 or 15 minute shorter videos to break down the entire history of the Daleks on TV and up until Resolution, and then do a ranking on Christmas Day and plus the Peter Cushing films.
Yeah.
And then that's what I started doing. And then I think when we get to like the 1980s Dalek stories, the reviews started getting way longer and more in depth as I was hitting my stride with it. So I'm a bit frustrated now going back to those early Dalek Semper reviews from the 60s and 70s, where they're way shorter than they
Yeah.
probably should be. Like a few weeks ago, I had like a 30-40 minute review of Galaxy 4, and then you go back and the Daleks review is 12 minutes. Like, I love the Chumbleys, but I don't know if they deserve as much of a breakdown as that first Dalek story from 1963. So yeah, so I'm actually wanting to redo those early Dalek reviews in the near future. But yeah, so that was the inspiration for it. Plus, YouTube is a strange beast with strange algorithms, and they like
Yeah.
long content, long videos in a really truncated amount of time. So releasing 25 videos during Christmas, that was good. That helped to build an audience. That's where you found me as well. So it's clearly worked to some extent. And then the next year I decided to do Cybersember
Yeah.
as well. Same deal, but for Cybermen. And then year after, I did the top 50 Doctor Who revived series scenes. And now the year after, I started with like a Hartnell marathon, which is now not a month-long thing, but every week there's a Hartnell era review. So that's currently what I'm in the middle of.
Yeah. It is really cool to see that you continue that format with the Cyberman stuff and the top 50 revived scenes as well. And one thing I've really admired about your videos, especially your reviews, is how in depth you go. You really go into every detail of the serials, which I really do enjoy. Um, do you feel like when there's a new episode of the show on, like, especially with the upcoming 60th anniversary specials, do you feel like it changes the way you watch the episode initially? Like, do you just sit down and watch the episode just as like, just as a fan, or do you approach it in a critical way from the
Yeah,
offset?
so yeah, that's interesting. It's not something that I'm really conscious about. I do just sort of like watch it just as a fan,
Yeah,
and it's mainly with the second viewing where I'm thinking, okay, what clips could I use to demonstrate some points?
yeah,
If it's got Cybermen, which is the Cybermen and Cyber Steve skit, like I think
yeah,
there's an expectation with that now. So it's mainly with the second viewing where I'm thinking, okay, now this one's for work, but the
yeah,
first one is like for just a fan who really loves this show. So, but my reviews are more or less just a stream of consciousness anyway. Like, there's not so much a proper structure to it.
yeah,
Where I'll like with what I'll do is I'll go through with the history and the making of the story, any interesting trivia about it, and then just dive into what my general thoughts are. That's harder to do for the more modern reviews. Like, I'm not going to know the behind the scenes history of the Star Beast and the Giggle
yeah.
and what the upcoming 60th specials. We're not going to know for some time. So that part is like difficult to, how do you introduce it and how do you get into the meat of it? But for the classic stuff, there's so much material there to
Yeah.
work with for like, okay, here's how this story came about. Or, you ever heard of the massacre? This one's a wild ride. Like just the making of and how TV was made in the 60s. But what I want to try and emphasize, especially for the classic series ones, is that these were stories that were made by people and
Yeah.
creatives, and a lot of them had something to say. Like there's so much criticism and commentary out there that tries to be objective, and to an
Yeah.
extent I appreciate the the ambition to do an objective review, but I think the main objectivity you work with is what actually happened in the episode. Like that's the only objective truth that we all can agree on, but
Yeah.
even then we've got different interpretations of what that all means. So when it comes to the reviews themselves, I like to name drop people and be like, this was the production designer for this episode. This was their inspiration. Like the Sensorites, how it was inspired by like the Spanish church, which had all around angles. And the writer of that story, what's the who wrote the Sensorites? I'm neglecting my own, but Peter R. Newman, that was his name. How he wanted to become a soldier when he was young. He actually
Yeah.
tried to enlist when he was underage,
Oh no.
and but then once he actually was stationed out, he realized it was not what he thought it would be. So he dedicated his life to writing
Yeah.
anti-war stories, and that's why the Sensorites ends with the Japanese holdout soldiers allegory. These are people who wrote and made media because they wanted something to say,
Yeah.
and I think trying to say, "Oh, keep politics out of, like, keep all of that." Agenda pushing out of media is I think it's fundamentally a false premise,
Yeah.
but especially with something like Doctor Who as well, where it was made in the 60s from such a melting pot of creativity, like Waris Hussein and a closeted gay Indian man, Verity Lambert, a Jewish woman, the first female producer for the BBC drama department, and Sidney Newman, who wanted to make educational shows for kids, and he was a Canadian immigrant who worked for ABC TV.
Yeah.
These are people with something to say, and I want to make sure that that gets across in the reviews more than anything.
Yeah, of course. And especially like, going back to stories which were first broadcast so many years ago. And like the initial message was, as you said, probably blurred and maybe, misinterpreted over time. And it's good to, especially when you've got all that behind the scenes stuff available, it's really good to be informative, and it really does show in your reviews that you've done your research, and it is nice to learn some stuff about classic Who, especially because you know especially like the behind the scenes stuff, and especially with the origins of Doctor Who. Sometimes I do feel like we're not as appreciative about the beginnings because without those people being involved, we wouldn't have the show here today, which it is really lovely to hear and stuff.
Yeah,
Which,
yeah, and like, even Russell T Davies is like he is not a subtle writer.
oh yeah, definitely not.
He has a lot to say, and he's got like even like when you watch stories like Turn Left, and there's
Yeah,
very obvious political allegories in that story, but there's also a lot like where you can leave it up to interpretation.
yeah,
There's absolutely a line there. Like I know there's a lot of that's been said about the ninth and 10th Doctor as the last of the Time Lords, and it's maybe a survivor's guilt aspect from Russell being a survivor of the AIDS epidemic while he
yeah,
was growing up, and so many of his friends died because of that. And that is where you do get into interpretation, but it's still it just kind of shows that it's inescapable, and to
yeah,
try and avoid it is a fool's errand. And
yeah, of course.
it often says a lot more about the person critiquing the media than it does the media itself. But yeah, and that when we move into the next era as well, because Russell has gone from It's a Sin, Years and Years, etc. Like he's clearly grown and evolved a lot as a person and as a writer, and I'm personally very excited about that.
Yeah, same here. And I do want to touch upon your last point. So with obviously, Russell is back making Doctor Who. Do you feel like, because as you said, he's produced some really, really good TV stuff, with It's a Sin and Years. Do you feel like we will see something similar to RTD1, or do you feel like it will be something similar to his more recent stuff, especially It's a Sin?
So yeah, so that's interesting because It's a Sin and Years are made by the same writer who gave us that era of Doctor Who, but
Yeah,
they are at different demographics. Those
yeah,
are explicitly 9 p.m.
yeah,
adult dramas, and Russell's of course was more aware than anyone about the need to approach the format based on the time slot and the audience. So I think, but even going back to Rusty Davis one, RTD one, the beginning of that era is so different to the end of it. Like I was
yeah,
chatting with Rob Shearman for it was for my Trip of a Lifetime series where I didn't want to review Dalek, so I just
yeah,
chatted with Rob Shearman for like 3 hours, which was really fun. But yeah, he made the observation that going from Rose to the end of time, it's a night and day different show. Like,
yeah,
and not just because the camera quality and it's gone from standard definition to HD, just the bones of it and how it approaches drama and characters and tone are so different. So I imagine we are going to get something that superficially is similar to his previous era, David Tennant, Catherine Tate, and there'll be maybe Ruby Sunday is your working class council estate, young blonde companion.
yeah,
I think there'll be these superficial elements that are reminiscent of his era,
yeah,
but the actual tone of it and what it has to say will be very different. Either way, I think we're going to be in for some really good Doctor Who.
yeah.
Hopefully it is markedly different from what it was
Yes.
before, but we'll see. That's the unknown's quite exciting here, and especially with Ncuti Gatwa, who seems like such an inspired choice. I was chatting with Crispy Pro the other day about like the casting,
Yeah.
and I didn't really understand the comparison as I was making it, but as I've thought about it more, he's like the modern equivalent to Tom Baker's casting, where not necessarily the quality of the Doctor, we don't know yet, but
Yeah.
when Tom Baker's off camera, he's still the Doctor.
Yeah.
But with Ncuti, it seems like there's so much of himself in the roles that he does, like whether it's Barbie or Sex Education. I
Yeah.
think he brings a lot of himself into these roles, and it'll be interesting to know how much of the 15th Doctor is a wholly unique performance,
Hmm.
or if it's just Ncuti, but he's traveling in time and space. That's interesting. But either way, he's a fascinating choice, and only and Russell's got such pedigree that people just want to work with him. Like you can see why he's got such great cast in It to Sin
Yeah.
and Years, because people want to work with him because he's got such wonderful scripts and also great award success. People want those Royal Television Society
Oh
awards,
yeah.
Yeah. It pays to collab with Russell. That's the cynical part, but also people just want to be involved in his projects. So considering that he had the pick of
Yeah.
any actor and he went with Shooty, that in and of itself is really, really fascinating.
Yeah, of course. And because I remember in the lead up to the reveal of what people were referring to as the 14th Doctor then,
Mm.
there
How
were a lot
naive.
of oh yeah. I feel sorry for the people that put bets on for David Tennant to be the 14th Doctor and lost out, but we move on. But yeah, there was a lot of speculation about who was going to be the Doctor. And I remember there was a lot of speculation about people like Lydia West, who had
Mm.
previously worked with Russell. And the fact that Shooty was shown, I feel like, yeah, there's something really interesting about why he was chose. And I do feel like we are going to find out why, especially with the upcoming Christmas special, which will be, Shooty's full debut, which I am really looking forward to
Mm.
seeing. And the reason why I brought up about the RTD1 and RTD2 comparisons, even though we don't know what the new era is going to be just yet, is because there's been a lot of debate online, especially with David Tennant coming back, Catherine Tate coming back, and obviously the next lot of episodes are meant to be celebrating the 60th anniversary. And a lot of people have just been saying, no, it's just celebrating RTD1. How do you feel about
I understand in terms of like the marketing and the optics how it
that?
looks like. I get it completely. Like
Yeah,
David Tennant, Catherine Tate, even Murray Gold, and
yeah,
like it's the same producers as well, but under a different company through
yeah,
Bad Wolf as opposed to the BBC. Andy Pryor as well as the casting director, but then again I was watching The Devil's Hour on Amazon Prime, which is produced by Sue Virtue, so like Stephen Moffat's wife as well.
yeah,
And Andy Pryor was in the credits for the casting for that. So he's not just the Doctor Who machine,
yeah,
but yeah, we won't know until it's broadcast.
yeah,
Like we've got Beep the Meep who's from the comics as well. We've
yeah.
got potentially the Celestial Toy Maker. We don't
Hmm.
know from back from 65, 66 when he first appeared. We've got to wait for the stories, especially because we believe that the Wild Blue Yonder, the second episode, was entirely studio filmed,
Yeah.
or at least predominantly. So God knows what they're hiding behind
Mm.
the green screens for that one. There was also something from Russ T Davis in a recent Doctor Who magazine where he said he could not believe like the actor that they've gotten for like the ending of, was it the ending of the 60th or the ending of series 14? Either way, that we maybe there's some classic connection that's coming back in the near future, but
Yeah.
so we've got to wait until it's actually broadcast. But when it comes to like actually marketing the upcoming run, I can see why they've gone more modern. Like it's more there's more average people, the average person who
Yeah.
I keep on saying as if they're a real person. They have way more of a connection to um, David Tennant and Catherine Tate,
Yeah.
as opposed to say Tom Baker and Louise Jameson, for
Yeah.
example. Not to say that Fourth Doctor and Leela's not terrific, and I'm sure maybe there'll be some celebration there. But when you're trying to promote a series, you've got to go where the people are. You got to go
Yeah.
where the most recent emotional connection is, or
Yeah.
the most potent emotional connection, and that's going to be for a series that broadcast 15 years ago as opposed to a series that was broadcast 45 years ago.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
yes, I get that as well.
Yeah, of course. And one thing to remember, and I'm sure you're aware of anyway, is that obviously the 60th specials are, having David Tennant at the center of it is because, yeah, Shooty was busy filming for Sex Education and his role in Barbie as well.
Mm.
And if, say, Russell didn't come up with the idea to bring back David, in main role capacity, we wouldn't have had or it would have turned out in a different way. We might have not had any episodes that year, which would have been,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's once again the what a fandom wants and what reality has in store for them kind
yeah,
of headbutting each other. Obviously there might have been an alternative universe where Matt Smith comes back, or and it's the same, but it's Matt Smith and Karen Gillan. That would have been
yeah,
very interesting. But because you've got David Tennant and Catherine Tate, and they've got a pre-existing relationship with
Yeah.
Russell, and he's the architect of their characters and that.
Yeah.
So you know, it would be really cool to have like an 11th Doctor and Amy Pond written by Russell T Davies for 3 specials, hypothetically. But there's there's the original authorship, which leads an authenticity to it, in my opinion, at least.
And
So it's we want stuff for the 60th.
yeah, yeah,
It's a
exactly.
diamond celebration.
Yeah, exactly. And it shouldn't be ignored. And, I am really grateful that, we are getting content for the 60th. I am always grateful when Doctor Who was on TV because, there was a time where it wasn't. And especially with the amount of gap years we've had in recent years.
Mm.
And obviously, as you said before, you've got to be realistic because, yeah, it would be really cool to have the 11th Doctor and Amy Pond being written by Russell T Davies, but they are in demand, especially, Karen Gillan with
Oh yeah.
the Marvel movies, and, she's done a lot of really cool projects. Matt Smith with the House of Dragon as well. So, yeah, and then obviously you got to factor in, the classic Doctors were just in the Power of the Doctor, so would you want them back again? And then modern Doctors, Christopher Eccleston. And then Peter Capaldi has also said on record that he wouldn't do it as well.
Yeah, like my dream would that for the 60th anniversary would have 3 specials with Colin Baker and Nicola Bryant. But I don't think
cool.
yeah, that would be cool. But I don't think that that's 10 million guaranteed live audience on BBC One in November. I don't think we've got those numbers, which is a shame. But a man can dream.
Exactly. That's the thing. You can always think of what ifs, and imagine, but obviously there's that unfortunate thing which is reality. But just to touch upon the final segment about your YouTube channel, obviously, yeah, you've been in the game for a while. You've produced a lot of content. You've had a lot of success with your channel. What advice would you give to people that wanted to start producing Doctor Who content on YouTube?
My advice is to just go for it, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't say upload the very first thing that you do, because once you've gotten started, like momentum and stuff will compel you to do more. And potentially that means you may end up running before you're able to. So my advice would be to do a few test videos or to some test concepts that you don't upload, you don't make publicly available. Maybe show your friends or family or someone who you trust who's also a fan, and then do a few test videos to like learn how to edit and learn the skills and find a format and such. Because not everything that you make needs to go on the internet.
Yeah.
I should stick with my own advice when it comes to social media. Not every thought you have needs to go online.
Yes.
Sometimes restraint is the best trait you can have as a content creator. But yeah, I think if you've got something that you want to say, then you're of course more than welcome to say it and express it in a format that you deem appropriate. So I think give it a few test videos or a few test concepts. Don't upload them. Watch them. Figure out where you think you need improvement, or that edit could have been snappier. I could use a different clip there, or maybe this is just the wrong format in general. Maybe I should. I'm going unscripted. Maybe I should do short scripted segments. Whatever you think is best for you as well. And then once you get started, you keep doing it because you enjoy doing it, as opposed to trying to find an audience, trying to collab with people and such. So that's my advice. I don't think you need to dive head first into it straight away. Test the waters a bit in your own personal space in terms of like what you think you're capable of doing, and then once you feel like, okay, this is something that I think people would enjoy watching, as opposed to me testing out a new editing software and then putting it out there. That's the advice I'd give.
Yeah, that's some really solid advice. And that's what I really enjoy about having other content creators on here as well, because especially with yourself, you've been in the YouTube game for a while, and I've seen on Twitter, you've had some content ID disputes as well. You've clashed with the BBC there, and it is really nice, being informed by I guess veterans of the Doctor Who YouTube game, which I really do appreciate. So thank you, Will, for giving your advice.
No, you're very welcome. But also, like, for like content ID stuff, like it's like every week I get maybe 2 or 3 messages from a Doctor Who YouTuber or creative who was like, yeah, so I've noticed you have BBC Studios content ID. How do you get around this stuff? And I'm like, well, my young apprentice. Here's my copied and pasted documents, and here's all. Yeah. So yeah, I'm glad that I'm at least for that particular part of being a Doctor Who or like BBC adjacent commentator, I can assist there. I'm doing God's work.
Yes, you are, and keep at it, man, because you're helping us all out for sure.
Thank you.
But let's move on to a very interesting segment for the podcast. Obviously, yeah, you mentioned earlier you've been a part of the Doctor Who fandom for a while. You started off on forums, and that led to you making videos. But you've also been a part of Twitter, or X as it's now called. What's been the most memorable controversy that you've seen online from fans?
So I think it's safe to say that, Doctor Who fandom is a very unique and special fandom.
Yes.
But I think something kind of broke in the minds of many people when Jodie Whittaker was announced as the Doctor.
Yeah.
Now, you can say whatever you want about the subjective quality of the actual stories once they were broadcast. Okay,
Yeah, of course.
You can have those opinions, and you're more than entitled to them. But just the initial gut reaction to Doctor 13's a Woms. That was sort of, for many people, I think, kind of like flipped a switch in their brains, and they never quite recovered from it. Like even like some respected like commentators and that and fans, like for example Ian Levine, just is very furious about the. And I can understand. I don't condone, but I understand the general public maybe having that sort of gut reaction to that because they don't quite understand. But a Doctor Who fan should be super hyper aware that within 4 or 5 years' time, that actor's going to leave and somebody else will be taking their place.
Yeah.
So this is not like, you should know better. You're a Doctor Who fan on Twitter, so I know that you already don't know that well, but you should know better. But so that sort of response kind of led to a lot of crazy fear mongering and rumor mongering, which I can't get into all of them. But like, you've got these like big channels and big users who are saying like Chris Chibnall is like secretly Jewish and that's why he's ruined Doctor Who, and some people will say he's not, it's just Stephen Moffat started it in series 10, or like Jodie Whittaker is leaving the series due to either being pregnant or fighting with Chris Chibnall. And these rumors would happen every single year. So that when Jodie Whittaker was announced to be leaving, they were like, we were right. Although they'd said that every month for the past 4 years. So you were going to be right eventually. It was just a patience game. But the funniest controversy that I saw was something that fans have affectionately referred to as chaos in Cardiff.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So this was during the filming of Series 12 in 2019, when I don't even know where it started. I've been searching for like the genesis of the chaos in Cardiff rumor, and I think it was a Twitter account which has now since been deleted or banned or whatever. And the rumor pertained that Jodie Whittaker and Chris Chibnall got into very public, very large fights on location while filming in Cardiff over some creative disagreement. And Jodie walked off the set, and all of the cast and crew did in solidarity because Chris Chibnall's so bad and evil. Because when you dislike something for ideological reasons like this, it's not just Chris Chibnall's a creative who you disagree with. He has to be a bad person. He has to be so vile that he'd mistreat the crew and they'd all walk off in solidarity and stuff. And and then the rumor would go on further that Bradley Walsh and Jodie Whittaker left the show, and this was like filming for Series 12, so we know that this didn't happen.
Yeah.
And this rumor wound up gaining so much traction that even Chris Chibnall himself had to respond to it. It was like with the Radio Times that him and the BBC released a statement saying, and I quote, "It's grade A. Shall I say nonsense or shall I say bullshit? I don't know how many times I say it. I swear on my life." And Jodie Whittaker's talked about this as well, saying, people said that I've left the series because I'm pregnant. Am I pregnant? And she'd have to like check to make sure. It's this sort of like weird constant fear mongering that happens. And I've been covering all of this for a while as well. Like apparently there was going to be no police public call box Tardis now
Yeah, I remember
because of
that
like
one.
and because of all Black Lives Matter, and the BBC are going so woke and pandering that they're not even going to have the association with police because of
Yeah,
that. And then it was terrific timing because 2 weeks later we saw the TARDIS on location, and it was still a police box. So
yeah.
that was one of the rare instances of we didn't even have to wait for the series to broadcast to know that that was complete poppycock, to put it politely. So yeah, it gets this constant stuff as well. You see this a lot in other fandoms as well, particularly Star Wars and that.
Oh yeah,
But,
oh yeah,
but yeah, like how many times has Kathleen Kennedy resigned? I think 30 times over the past few years. Yeah, it's not enough that this is a era of the show that I personally don't like or I disagree with or
yeah,
whatever. You're entitled to all of that. It's just the need to basically fearmonger to an audience that these are not just creatives you dislike, but fundamentally bad people.
yeah,
That's the bit that really makes it more insidious than anything. It's, people who are caught in the echo chambers, like I said, they're in a manner of speaking, they're sort of like victims of this because they're a captive audience. But it's the people who are pushing that where it becomes a little bit more like darker in terms of the motivation for it as well. Like I said, I can't remember exactly what started Chaos in Cardiff, but that was such a fun meme as well,
yeah,
especially considering like I don't like everything that Chris Chibnall's ever made, but I know people in the industry who have worked with him,
yeah,
and he's generally considered just a lovely guy to work with. Quite soft spoken and very polite and nice, and like like I said, I've worked in TV before for years. I am certain that on the set of Doctor Who, there have been arguments, there
yeah,
have been disagreements and stuff. Like it happens all the time, especially on high-end TV dramas
yeah,
when there is a lot of money involved, a lot of people working to very tight schedules, and tensions run high. And I'm sure there may have been shouting matches or disagreements. It's almost inevitable because it's a
yeah. It's bound to
workplace.
happen.
Yeah, but to the extent where it's got to be something especially terrible with no evidence, but it's true because Whitaker and Chibnall are fundamentally bad people, so that's why it's a credible rumor. Yeah, that's the bit that makes it especially memorable, especially with how the BBC had to respond to it because
Yeah,
it gained some traction, which is particularly funny. You don't see them actually getting involved with fandom rumors to that extent.
yeah. And something that I remember, especially with the police box rumor, is that it gets picked up by certain news websites and stuff. And I think it did with the Chaos in Cardiff one as well. And when stuff gets picked up by other stuff outside of the Twitter sphere and stuff, I feel like people start treating it as official news rather than like a rumor,
Yeah.
which again can obviously cloud people's judgment and stuff like that, and start judging on something which more than likely isn't a reality. It's a load of BS
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah, especially with those who start the rumors, they know full well that they're lying. That is
Yeah,
like a cut and dry like motive. Like you know that they know that they're doing that. Like there was someone who was spreading rumors that in series 13 there's going to be a non-binary companion and such. And like normally like people were accepting that because they want to see representation.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
and there was I think Pink News even picked up on that story. And then once they were pointed out, Pink News were informed, actually, this is somebody with like a 0% truth like track record. They deleted the embed of the video on the post, but they kept the post up,
Okay.
which was sort of like a cynical, like, we've got the story, let's try and keep the story, which I actually think, I don't appreciate the person who spread the lie in the first place, but if you're going to, if you're going to credit a source in massive you keep it on the page or you delete the news story. So yeah, stuff like that. And then John Bishop wound up getting cast as the next companion for series 13. So we know
Yeah,
that wasn't true.
yeah,
Yes, stuff like that is happening quite frequently. It'll be interesting to know whether or not that will subside or change with Russ T Davis again. From what I've seen, I don't think it is, because I think that there's too much content to be farmed. There's too much outrage to be generated
Yeah,
with backtracking. Now it's now I'm seeing genuinely discussion online about how the Rusty Davis One era, which was previously adored and loved by these people, is now like woke ground zero, and this is going to be even worse than before. And yeah, there's so much like cynical outrage baiting that's happening, and especially with how we're seeing it manifest now with series 14. Like Shooty Gatwa has had to hire 24/7 security for him and his family. Like these have like real consequences,
yeah, they
which is,
do.
it's partly one reason why I want to try and emphasize the people who make the media as well, because these are people, even if you disagree with them, like they're still trying to make entertainment for you, even
Yeah,
if you personally disagree with it. So yeah, there's that aspect to it. So yeah, we can laugh about chaos in Cardiff and that, but I know an actor who was in series 11 with a social media profile, and just by being in series 11 for one episode they were hounded off social media. Like it's not we laugh at it, but these do have like actual like
yeah,
consequences and collateral damage. It's not just Chibnall and Whitaker who bear the brunt of it, but it's not just them who are on the receiving end of it. It's the people who are associated with the series more generally and broadly. So, yeah, we can laugh, but we also do need to understand there's a bit of an insidious nature to it, which
yeah,
is sad to see Doctor Who fall to this culture war nonsense.
yeah. Of course, because at the end of the day, whether you like the work, whether you like the characters or whatever, at the end of the day, they are still people, still human beings. And I remember as well, to touch upon Star Wars with the sequel trilogy. Daisy Ridley, even though she's back on Instagram now, I believe she originally had to come off there because I think it was after the release of The Last Jedi, I think, or it might have been just before she went off social media because of the amount of negative comments, nasty direct messages and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think especially in this day and age when people don't like something, they don't just like it, they despise it and they treat it like yeah, just like absolute, like like a direct, I'm trying to think of the word, like like it's
They
a
make it
like
personal.
yeah,
Yeah.
like it's personal attack, and they just want to vent instead of just like criticizing someone, just saying yeah, I didn't like that. They just want to make it personal, as you said. And
Yeah, it's like the beginning of Spyfall Part One when Stephen Fry's character defers to Graham like as the authority of the group,
yeah,
and then the Doctor comes in and says, "Actually, no, I've had an upgrade." It can't just be, "Oh, here's a slightly passive aggressive gender observation," which I've been on the receiving end of that before. I've like been a runner on a TV job, going
yeah,
into a prop store with the female producer of the show who's actually got the check, and the authority defers to me because I'm the young man. Like I've seen that happen. I've been in that
yeah,
situation. So to see that happen in Spyfall, oh, I felt represented. But like it's not just a snide observation, it's no, this is an anti-man episode. Like
yeah.
they have to up it, that because that's how you retain the audience and the outrage and stuff. It's knowingly doing it as well.
Yeah, and that scene in particular, I mean, I haven't been in that scenario that you've said, but it's nice that you've also seen that in real life. Well, not nice, but that you've can say like it's not what people are making it out to be.
Mm.
But I really enjoyed that scene because beforehand, in series 11 we hadn't really had any references to the fact that the Doctor was a male before, except for I think it was at the beginning in the first episode, the woman who fell to earth, and then I think there was a brief mention in the I forgot the episode
It's like
name
Demons
now.
of the Punjab. Yeah,
Yes.
like the Witchfinders is really the only gendered story, but like
Yeah.
it's the obligatory. We've got a female Doctor. You've got to do a Witchfinder story.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And it's just nice that the Doctor Who is always referencing the past, and I feel like stuff like that, it's just an innocent nod, but
yeah.
obviously in this day and age, people do want to make it something that it isn't, which is very unfortunate because as you said, it does lead to some consequences for those people, whether that be them leaving social media for their own mental health or more serious situations as well. It's
Mm.
I just wish people would think before they write.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And like I said, it's mainly due to the bad actors who are like instigating this as well, whether it is like institutions on like tabloids or
Yeah.
TV channels and stuff, or it is actually like people on social media or on their own YouTube channels as well who are stoking this as well. I think it's just a case of just making more people aware of these tells and that these aspects of it as well. Which is why like I've got a playlist on my channel which is about responding to stuff like this as well. Like it's like with when Jodie Whittaker was doing, I think it was it Vogue or Vulture? It was it was like a tabloid magazine where she was responding to tweets about her casting announcement.
Yeah.
And someone's like, "Oh, the Doctor's a woman now. The show is now ruined forever." And her response was, "All right, rude." That was the response.
Yeah.
But then that response is then turned into Jodie Whittaker is a man-hating, misandrist, feminazi. It's like it was just the mildest of like passive-aggressive rebuttals to a pretty obviously sexist tweet.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what that person's doing now, but like yeah, and even that is somehow twisted and misconstrued into something else. It's it becomes like a cultural collateral damage. I just want to watch the show. I want to have a fun blue box time with the Jodie Whittaker and Shooty Gatwa and David. I want to have it's everyone else who's dragging it down.
Yeah,
I just want to watch the fun show.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I've, despite me, just like yourself, not enjoying everything that Chris Chibnall's done, but I also haven't enjoyed everything that Moffat and even Russell have done in the past, like in terms of episodes. But I am always appreciative of Doctor Who being on air because not many shows have, survived for 60 odd years, and the fact that Doctor Who is here, still breathing, a bright future ahead, with the Disney collaboration, stuff like that. It's a very exciting time to be a fan, and
Doctor Who is simultaneously one of those shows where it's terrible and bad and no one's watching it because it's fallen to the woke warriors or whatever, but it's also popular enough to use it as a battleground for culture war stuff. It's simultaneously no one's watching it and it is also everyone's watching it because it's one of those contradictions that's fundamental to keeping the outrage going.
Yeah.
So, we should kind of be flattered in a certain extent, but it's hopefully it dies down over the next few years. But I do think with Shooty's casting, it's going to go back to normal, I think, for the 60th, and then when Shooty's the Doctor proper, it's going to ramp up again, and then we're going to do this cycle again for another 3 years, and I am exhausted by it. But
it is really exhausting, especially like being like an active user, on stuff like Twitter and YouTube, because you do see the same comments, and then obviously people start quote tweeting and stuff like that, and it ends up on that cycle. And despite you not following the users that are spouting these opinions and stuff like that, you do end up seeing it in some shape or form.
I'm looking forward to how they spin the Shooty Gatwa's left the series because he's pregnant. I look forward to eventually that's going to happen, and I look forward to seeing how that's passed out.
And I did see something actually, which I have kind of kept in the back of my mind when it comes to these rumors and people with these negative opinions and stuff about the gap years and or long gaps in content. Do you feel that with the long gaps we've had recently between episodes, do you feel like that has kind of been a driving force towards this stuff happening?
Yeah, I think so, because it's about a vacuum, isn't it? So I'm in two minds about it, because I understand now in hindsight that 13 episodes a year plus a Christmas special for a production team for the BBC was not a feasible or healthy work schedule. So there's a reason they tried to mitigate the issues with the Doctor Light and Companion Light episodes and stuff, and that worked for a bit. But as budgets got slashed and license fee has not kept up with inflation, so there's cuts everywhere happening. But there's a demand for more like bigger TVs, bigger budgets, better VFX and stuff. So I understand why the gap years have been happening. But I think it's just a case of maybe being a bit more strategic with what they do outside of the show. Because I know that Chris Chibnall maybe approached the show as a high-end drama producer, like something akin to Broadchurch, which is a valid approach to take. But I think for Doctor Who, without the frequent marketing, without the collaborations and appearances from the actors outside of the show. Like, Matt Smith would host the proms, and there'd be, frequent comic relief appearances. And
Yeah.
I know that Jodie's era was marred in terms of promotion by the pandemic and everything, which is like she did comic relief for her and Mandip Gill, where they were doctors.
Yeah, I
Like
remember that.
so stuff like, I understand that there's those limitations, completely get it, but that doesn't really explain why license holders had no material for a brand new calendar in 2022,
Yeah.
because they weren't being sent any material because the production office was just they had security outside making sure that no licensed photos or anything was going to, like, that doesn't help anyone.
Yeah.
Which is a shame, because you've got these license holders who want to do all this stuff outside of the show, like Maze Theory, who've made the games. You've even got now Magic the Gathering, who are doing a Doctor Who collaboration there. There's clearly demand for all this merch and this stuff, but the Chibnall era just really wasn't giving it to them, which is,
Yeah.
I think they didn't want anything to leak, which I
Hmm.
partly understand, but there should have been no reason why there wasn't a character options resolution Dalek drone like a month after that story was broadcast.
Yeah.
They had to wait like a year, I think, for that to actually get released. That shouldn't have happened. Everyone should have had a Pating backpack in 2019. Like every child, mandated by law. So that's, but there's nothing like that, because there was no concept art or images for license holders to work with to start making drawing up specs and designs for the merch and stuff. It was just Funko Pops, and even then just a couple of Funko Pops.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that Funko Pops are the be all and end all of a show's success,
Mm.
but there's even like that discussion has happened this week, because New York Comic Con's coming up and they've announced a 14th Doctor Funko Pop. But it's
Yeah.
like, wait, Yaz and Dan and Ryan and Graham, they didn't get Funko Pops, and like,
Yeah.
it's a storm in a teacup because it's Doctor Who Twitter, but there is a
Yeah.
broader point to be made there that I think they could have done more outside of the show. But of course, a pandemic limited that. I completely understand that part. But from series 11 and 12, in terms of the promotion leading up to series 12, they could have done significantly more
Yeah.
outside of that to sort of prevent the vacuum from becoming so noticeable.
Yeah, certainly. And very interesting that you touched upon the upcoming Funko Pop with the 14th Doctor. I do feel like that, yeah, okay, I do wish that we saw, more, not just Funko Pops, but more, figures and stuff from Jodie's era. It would have been cool, yeah, to have them. But I feel like if they start on the new stuff, obviously, David Tennant is coming back, the new era is starting, we'll probably get a 15th Doctor Funko Pop as well and all that stuff. But if we start getting the new stuff, and just like they did with when they started the New Who figurines all the way back, in 2005 and stuff, we can start getting, the older stuff that was missed off, like, character options to constantly be doing classic Who stuff. We're getting the Richard Herndl First Doctor stuff, which looks really cool.
Oh, is that I've not seen that. Is that a character options thing? Or...
Yeah, it's coming out. Well, it's meant to be early September. It's part of the Dalek history of the Daleks.
Okay.
So from the Death Zone, which looks really cool. And yeah, I'm definitely going to try and get that if I can find it in the local.
Herndl Doctor needs a Funko Pop. I'll
Yes.
die on this hill.
Yes, literally the fact that I am going to be having obviously William Hartnell's First Doctor as a figure, then David Bradley's, and now Richard Hurdle's as well. That is crazy.
The three Hartnells. There we go. That's a Batman March model action figure series ready to happening. Like,
yes.
He should be working on that immediately.
Yes, certainly. But yeah, just to summarize what we were just speaking about there, yeah, I do feel like once, they've got the new stuff out of the way and, they're getting the attention, people are buying the new stuff, we can start, going back and, we could get like a Spyfall set or something, which I feel like would be cool.
Yeah, I think also this is once again the boring realities contrasting with fandom expectations. Yeah. We are in a pretty tough time in terms of the UK as an economy and stuff that's being made. And I'm sorry to drag this nerd Doctor discussion to UK politics and the economy. But yeah, there's a reason why steelbook and home media manufacturing hasn't been as prolific in the past 2 years, and that's because a lot of that stuff comes from Poland, which is next to Ukraine, and there's all
Yeah.
that stuff happening. So all this these geopolitics coalescing on our little fun sci-fi blue box show, and yeah, and also people can't quite afford, or they when it comes, I think as a Doctor Who fandom, we don't quite prioritize tangible tat, like in terms of like
Yeah.
Funko Pops and Sonic, like every so often you'll get a Sonic screwdriver, like the 14th Doctor one, and that sells out immediately.
Yeah.
But I think maybe as a fandom, we sort of maybe generally more prioritize home media, like the collection box sets, books, and things like that, and the Doctor Who magazine as well, as opposed to the comics. I know there's Titan Comics has done a pretty well received run of stuff, but I don't think that that sells quite as well as, say, steelbook or Blu-rays of the animated reconstructions. I think fandoms and different franchises have different priorities when it comes to what they want, generally speaking. And I think for Doctor Who, we're less fussed about action figures and Funko Pops and
Yeah.
the models and stuff, and we're more into the books, the biographies, and the home media releases. That's
Yeah.
what I personally think.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. And it's funny that we've been talking about Doctor Who merch, because that's the next question I've got for you. Because yeah, there's been a lot of Doctor Who merch over the years. I want to know, in your opinion, what's the best Doctor Who merch we've received, and what's the worst one we've received?
So the worst one is the most basic answer ever, but it's got to be that Cassandra
Oh,
frame,
the destroyed
right?
one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
Ah,
audacity, but I kind of respect it.
yeah.
Like we could sell this one, right? I
Yeah.
want to. What that implies though is that they had a surplus of Cassandras that they were selling, and they
Yeah.
thought, okay, we've taken this as far as it can go. Let's just sell the frame, but we've got to take the Cassandra out. Is there like a warehouse somewhere with a box of like just Cassandra skins? Like just like flats, like it almost looks like from a distance like wafer biscuits or something. Like
Yeah.
that's got to exist. That's like lost media. That's next to Marco Polo, as far as I'm concerned.
It could be. Could be.
Hashtag hunt the Cassandra skins. That for me, that's the funny, like the one that everyone else points and laughs at. I'm not the first one to plant my flag there. But in terms of best, like I was saying, there's so many great books and like home media releases and
Yeah.
stuff. Like I love the collection sets
Oh yeah,
broadly.
definitely.
Season 22, I think, has got the best in terms of just the broad overall features. There's so many great interviews on there. Yeah, the collection sets have been so we've been blessed as fans personally,
Yeah.
like especially considering that so much of like media from the 60s is like gone.
Yeah.
I when I'm doing my Hartnell reviews, I'm trying to think of I named different shows that writers and directors and stuff were working on. Oh, where can I find footage from this? Oh, it's lost. They lost that episode of Z Cars. You know that there's no compact that exists now, even though 10 to 15 million people were watching it in the 60s. Gone, like it was never there.
Yeah.
Whereas with Doctor Who, we've got these animated reconstructions. There's a season 2 Blu-ray like collection set. Yeah, I think the books as well are so good. There was even a recent one released from 10 Acre called Pull to Open, which is about the making of Doctor Who from the early 1960s. They had one called The Long Game, which is the same premise but the 2005 series, and that's that's the top gold standard in terms of a compacted, well-structured, here's the history of how Doctor Who was made in 2005.
Yeah.
And I've not finished the Pull to Open yet. I'm like a third of the way through it.
Yeah.
It only came out like a week ago. But yeah, so those from was it 10 Acre? 1 second. Pull to Open 10 Acre. I think it's 10 Acre. Yes, it is. Yeah. So it's written by Pull to Open is written by Paul Hayes.
Yeah.
And it's 1962, 1963, the inside story of how the BBC created and launched Doctor Who. From the Long Game book, I've learned so much about the BBC as like in its drama department in the early 2000s, how there was like nothing there. They had a massive flop with, was it El Dorado in like the early 2000s, the late 90s, which was so expensive and notoriously bad that it killed the whole department. So when Doctor Who comes along, they're like, okay, we're putting a lot of money into this, but whatever, it will sink or swim in Cardiff, whatever. And then they make it work. And then all of a sudden, Saturday tea time is now the big genre thing for all broadcasters to aspire to. It's how we got Merlin. It's how we got Primeval.
Yeah.
And like how this show, which was almost like doomed to fail because of the systemic failures of the BBC's drama department from a decade previous, actually panned out. So yeah, it really fascinating reads. There's so much good like written material on Doctor Who from fans, from independent publications. You've got like the Totally Tasteless John Nathan Turner book as well, which is really a really fascinating read. Andrew Cartmell's done a script Doctor book.
Yeah.
Basically, you can't go wrong with the books.
Yeah,
Like the non-fiction specifically, it's so much wonderful material there, and even from like the scripts, or was it? Oh, sorry, the Russell T Davies books.
Oh, the Writer's Tale.
The Writer's Tale.
Yeah.
I don't know why I lost that name, but yeah, the Writer's Tale. I would love there to be like a Moffat or Chibnall equivalent or something, even if it's not penned by them specifically. Stuff like that is so wonderful to see. And Doctor Who's the only sort of fandom that I'm like this invested in, and I get this much stuff from the broader like universe. I don't know if like, is there like a Star Wars equivalent to all of this stuff, or is there Star Trek, and I'm asking rhetorically, but I'm wondering if like, are we just an incredibly uniquely blessed fandom? And we just spend our time arguing on Twitter instead of acknowledging that. I don't know. Maybe that's very possible. But yeah, so much good written non-fiction material for Doctor Who.
Yeah, certainly. And I imagine that will obviously continue to go on because, again, like it's funny that you mentioned about, getting like the Writer's Tale equivalent with Moffat and Chibnall. I would be very, very interested. I would probably pre-order it day one if Chris Chibnall did his, because he was also in a very unique position because he was also writing Doctor Who during a pandemic. I would be very interested to learn how his plans changed. I would be very interested to know what the original Series 13 was. Sure.
Yeah, I think Chibnall as well. I deeply respect him as an advocate for a better industry. Because what he did after Doctor Who, which people will say, no, it's ruined his career. But honestly, when you show run Doctor Who, even if you can say creatively it didn't work, managing the logistics of a big show like that, I'm sure he was in demand. He had a lot of offers from a lot of different broadcasters and companies to manage big shows. I've no doubt in my mind. But he decided instead to invest that time with ITV to do showrunner workshops and basically teaching the next generation of scriptwriters how to run shows, because that's something the BBC used to do from the 50s up until like the 2010s, where they would do these workshops and these training things. Like right now in the TV industry, there's a shortage of floor managers, and one reason for that is because the BBC are no longer really funding like training courses on how to get runners and assistant floor managers and train them up to floor managers. So the fact that he's now using that clout and that the reputation from Doctor Who and his status of working on it, and is now giving back to the industry, massive respect.
Certainly as well. And again, it does help for not just for the future of Doctor Who, but obviously for the future of the film and television industry in general, because these people that are attending these workshops, you never know, they could end up making the next Line of Duty, the next 100%. Doctor Who. You never know when someone walks into that room what they're going to end up doing in the next 5 to 10 years. It's
like there's the BBC writers room, which is still going strong after several years, but the fact that there aren't also way more versions of that, and that more broadcasters aren't stepping up to that extent, mainly because of like just pure lack of funding, which is so depressing, because in the UK, like arts and media is like our biggest export, not just culturally but financially as well. But just going back to Doctor Who merchant books and stuff, there's a book I'm really looking forward to coming out later this year by David Brunt called The Production Diary, The Hartnell Years. So it's basically the diaries of like the production team and Hartnell during his time working on the show. And I want to know, is there a chapter for Dalek's master plan when all of the makeup team walked out because they were sick of his nonsense?
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, because that actually happened during the filming of Dalek's master plan. Like, I think he upset or offended one of the makeup artists. So in solidarity, the whole department walked out. So yeah, maybe that story's been embellished over the years, but that's the nuts and bolts version of it. So that's coming out later this year. It's actually coming out on Doctor Who Day, in November
Okay.
23rd. So I've already pre-ordered that from Telos Publishing. A lot of great stuff this year, plus Doomsday. So yeah.
Yeah, certainly, certainly. Yeah, there's a lot of content going for sure. But let's move on to the next segment. So for
Also, my cat's just turned up. Sorry.
oh no, no problem.
If you can hear the bell around her collar. Hello.
Oh bless.
Mwah.
Oh.
I'll try. Oh, where is she? There we go. Hey, Winnie.
Hello.
No, nope. She's looking outside. You don't even
Oh.
know what a Zoom call is, do you, Winnie?
Oh,
Right.
that's really cute. But okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, no, it's fine. No problem. No problem.
But yeah, but if you can hear a little bell, actually, I'll take her collar off so you don't hear the bell jangling. There
That's
we
a
go.
cool little sound effect.
Oh,
Oh, it's really cute.
she looks so grumpy.
Oh,
Anyway, right, off you go, little one. Go, be free.
be free, be
Be
wild.
free. Yeah, don't go outside though. There'd be monsters. Plus, it's raining.
Yeah,
So.
exactly. But the next segment of the podcast, which will be very interesting to hear your answer for this. So, just to fill you in, and for those that are tuning in for the first time, this is a debate question which you'll be marked on for your answer because I like picking hot topics. Because Doctor Who. It's a bit of a controversial show. We've touched upon that. There is a lot of controversy that, spans on the Twitter sphere and stuff like that. But yeah, you'll be marked by the audience at the end of the podcast's current series, and the winner will win a £50 Amazon voucher. So imagine all the Doctor Who merch you could get with that.
All of the broken Cassandra frames. Oh,
Exactly. But your question is, if you were able to produce a limited spin-off series for Doctor Who, what would it be and why? But bearing in mind, this spin-off would obviously only last for one series and would have 8 episodes.
Okay, so my idea for this, because when it comes to Doctor Who spin-offs, it's such fertile ground for anything, any companion, any incarnation of the Doctor, any gap in the history. Like I know the conventional wisdom for this answer is like a Paul McGann Time War series.
Yeah.
But no, I'll be different. I will cut a path, blaze a trail in a different direction. I think if there's one thing that the UK audience love more than Doctor Who, it is basic crime procedurals. So I was thinking something like a unit series where we follow a new recruit who is like maybe gets involved. It's kind of similar to Torchwood, but it's got a more military bent to it.
Yeah.
Where we follow a young rookie who maybe in the first episode something happens on their street and then they get involved and get recruited by Kate Stewart or an equivalent character. So maybe like a young actor like a Lydia West or something gets involved. Basically, yeah, that type of like young but very popular, incredibly talented actor who fronts the series as the new recruit. Winnie, what are you doing? There we go. Sorry. So that's kind of my pitch, where you've got these 8 episodes where you follow this young rookie recruit as they don't necessarily like work their way up the ranks because that's way too quick to do over the course of like 8 episodes, but they're learning the ropes at unit. Maybe I don't think that there's an episode where the Doctor steps in, but maybe there's like a hint to it or something. Like they get a signal that maybe they think that the Doctor's trapped somewhere and it turns out to be a decoy for like, because that's basically how you get units somewhere. You can say the Doctor's there, but that's part of the trap.
Yeah,
that's my basic pitch for it, really. You'd have your own like supporting characters as well, like the veteran who doesn't take too kindly to the young upstart being so quick to work their way through a unit and through training and things like that. But also it will be a case of like unit is becoming a increasingly militarized organization, but this new person would want to try and find a third way there, like maybe there's a way that these problems can be solved that don't involve everyone getting their rifles out all the time, which you don't want it to be a carbon copy of the Doctor and Brigadier dynamic, of course, but something akin to that, where it could even be like a commentary on sort of like the police procedural as well. But one reason I think Line of Duty was so successful is that everyone could get on board with the premise of uh, the police for the police and
Yeah.
stopping police corruption and everything. Like, even if you don't like the police as an institution or find them disagreeable, you probably would get on board with like a watchdog agency or organization that has to root out the police corruption, which is why I think that was such a big, like, massive, broad success as well. It made for great drama as well. So
Yes.
yeah, so like maybe a Jed Mercurio fronted series or like produced series with like a young Lydia West type, and then you could also just get the who's who of terrific British drama talent without having them commit to like full on sci-fi and makeup and stuff like that. So
No, that is
yeah.
an incredibly detailed answer. So thank you for, explaining your pitch spin-off. But one thing I'm curious on, because, you mentioned that you wanted to have a more military approach with it, and especially because it's a limited series as well. What would the tone be? Would it be something, family friendly, like Doctor Who and Sarah Jane Adventures, or would you go down the more adult slash R-rated tone with Torchwood and Class?
Yeah, because I think that's an interesting one because you want to maybe aim for like the Doctor Who target audience, maybe something that families could watch, or maybe like young teenagers could watch with their families. Like maybe not quite Torchwood age, maybe like at the target demographic of Class, which we all know was the breakout hit of the century that
Oh yeah.
everyone watched and adored. But I do think that the premise itself of the Dream Doctor 2 spin-off is a malformed premise because the
Yeah.
best spin-off has already been made and it was called Class. Um, but yeah, so it would be like maybe like a Torchwood age demographic, but it wouldn't necessarily be a super sexy hip and right now show where everyone gets their bombs out all the time. It would be maybe something more akin to like a Line of Duty or Vigil, which comes from the same
Yeah.
production company as well. Yeah, kind of like that, where you know there's not like gratuitous violence or sex or anything, so that a younger audiences are completely tuned out. But it is more there's less sci-fi fantasy elements to it.
Yeah, certainly. That's something that I do find really interesting as well because we've spoken about how the show's marketed and stuff, and when it comes to spin-offs, we haven't got any yet, but there has been a promise. There's been
Mm.
rumors and stuff like that. But in this ideal world, say you do get this unit series, I feel like yeah, it would be a good opportunity, especially with a limited runtime as well, to obviously explore the universe, but from a different angle. That's something that is risky because a lot of people watch Doctor Who because of the Doctor and the companion dynamic, and
Mm.
we mentioned this before about Doctor Light and companion light episodes. They are good, but sometimes they're not.
Yeah.
And it is a bit risky. And then obviously, yeah, do you want to have the Doctor included in that spin-off as well? It's
Mm. Yeah, I think for something like a unit spin-off like this, it would be more you could bring in former companions or actors who are from the show.
yeah,
Like for example, you could have an episode where Sontarans are doing something sketchy or something. So you
yeah,
bring in Martha Jones, who has had experience running with them before, and then you've got Freem Rajaman for an episode. That'd be really cool.
yeah,
Um, but
certainly,
but the constant dynamic would be like a Kate Stewart with the new recruit, or
yeah,
Osgood with the new recruit, whatever you wanted to establish with it. But maybe you deal with a premise where UNIT has recently reformed after the events of the Flux and Whittaker era, where was it Grand Serpent sort of like took
yes,
it down from the inside. It's sort of like rebuilding up, but it's becoming like more privatized and private police, private militia type thing.
hmm
And then by over the course of the series, that gets rooted out, stopped, and their unit becomes what it's supposed to be.
yeah.
And then that could lead into the show itself. But this is like an 8 episode dark chapter of Unit's history, seen from the perspective of a newcomer who tries to fix it from the inside.
Yeah, yeah. To be fair, yeah, that is like a really good premise. And to be honest, if you were to include like older companions, like you said, bring back Freema Agyeman as Martha would be an excellent choice. Bringing back an older companion, especially with a limited, selection of episodes, you wouldn't really need the Doctor there because the Doctor, in that series would just kind of be like a like a mythical person, really. You know, you
Yeah,
wouldn't need to see the Doctor. So, say
yeah.
if that was your entry into the Whoniverse, it would be like, okay, this Doctor sounds interesting. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
going to watch series 14.
Yeah, you could even make a joke about it. Like when the new recruit's being toured around the facilities, they're like, "Oh, this is Dave. He's on Doctor Watch, and he's basically just him with like 1,000 monitors. Any sign of the Doctor? Yep, no, mom." And he's just like looking around. You could even make like, and then every so often we'll like check up on Dave, who's on Doctor Watch, and it's like, "Oh, I thought I saw him, but no, that was just a moth on the screen." Like it's something like that where you could like even lampshade. Oh, is the Doctor going to turn up? No, no, he's not. No.
Yeah, that would be a cool little running gag. But thank you for answering that question. And I'm certainly won over by that premise because that's something I would really love to see. However, I am not the deciding vote. So, audience, for those that are watching, listening, please let us know in the comment section down below. Do you like Mr. Tardis's response to the little debate there? And yeah, you could be the deciding factor on if he wins that Amazon voucher. So,
I'm going to buy so much tat with that voucher. You have no idea.
yeah, exactly. So, if you want to help him get a little collection of destroyed Cassandras, then please voice your opinions.
I will personally finance the hunt for the lost Cassandra skins
Yes, exactly. There's a Doctor Who documentary in the making there for sure.
for the season 2 collection set. The series 2 collection set with
Yes.
the New Earth. That's the one.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that. But before we wrap up, I would love to answer a few audience questions that
Mm.
I've got from YouTube and Twitter. So I'm going to jump onto the YouTube side of things first. And Sir Who is very interested on hearing your views of Doctor Who collaborating with video games. So, like, stuff we've had with Fall Guys recently and the rumored Fortnite stuff. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, so that's just generally a net good, I think, from a franchise perspective. Getting like Cybermen and Dalek and 14th Doctor skins for Fall Guys, one of the biggest multiplayer games around, is there's no downside there. Yeah, like at least from what I can see, at least. So yeah, but in terms of like Doctor Who and video games generally, it's a tough nut to crack because Doctor Who, by its nature, is like a non-combat show where like you're not like 90% of video games are built around conflict and combat, which is just like the nature of it. So trying to do a Doctor Who series that's not just like a platformer or a puzzle game, it's a bit difficult unless you were to. I'm a unit soldier, and now it's just Call of Duty, but in the Doctor Who universe. I think we can maybe think a bit more creatively than that. Like the Edge of Time, Edge of Reality game, while very heavily flawed, was like there were some great horror aspects there. The Weeping Angel
certainly.
level when you're in the maze, like the catacombs of that building, like heart in my mouth, like oh, it was so genuinely tense. So yeah, but in terms of like collaborations, Fortnite, Four Guys, there was even that go back to everything comes back to Funko Pops. There was that Funko matching game, and that had some classic Doctor Who stuff in there as well. Yeah, I think that's generally just a good thing to just increase the profile of the show. Like so much of media marketing is not just the trailers and the promotion and stuff. It's trying to make it like an omnipresent brand. Like so, like I know a big part of like Star Wars and Marvel marketing is to have toys in the toy aisle, even if they never get sold. Just having them there on the shelf sort of subconsciously instills to the prospective buyer that this is a brand that is worthy of being on the shelf and that they're around and people buy it. Like it's a weird complex sociological phenomenon when it comes to like marketing, but that's a part of it as well, which is why I think we going into Toys R Us in the late 2000s and seeing the massive orange wall of Doctor Who merch and stuff, even if hardly any of it sold hypothetically, or if you never bought it yourself, knowing that this is the big thing kids are into, that instills an impact on parents and the buyers and on a culture generally. So it's good. Thumbs up from me is the short answer to that question.
No, well, thank you for answering that question. And I'm going to do one more from YouTube, and then I've got a few on Twitter, which I'd like to touch upon. But the next one is from Sarah Glover on YouTube. And Sarah has asked, why did you decide to be Mr. Tardis? What's the story behind that?
So people like to think that I called myself Mr. Tardis because I put myself on the de facto pedestal of Doctor. No, that's not the case. So when starting out my YouTube channel, I was looking for like channel names, so I was going to go for TARDIS reviews. But then YouTube said that username is taken. Here's a list of suggested usernames that are similar. So and one of those names was Mr. TARDIS reviews. So I thought, oh yeah, I could do this. And Mr. TARDIS is the name, and reviews is what I do. So yeah, Mr. TARDIS. That's kind of what I went for, and that's kind of stuck.
No, that's a fair enough origin, and obviously, that name as well, yeah, has certainly stuck. That's been your brand, and you've had a lot of success with it. But it is really cool, learning, why that, became a thing.
Yeah, YouTube chose it for me.
Yeah,
The name was given to me. I did not choose it.
but yeah, no, it's really cool to learn. But let's move on to the Twitter sphere, or the X sphere as it's now called. From Jack Alexander. Who would you trust to get you to Heathrow Airport in the 1980s the best? The Fifth Doctor or Rora Noah's Zorro? I'm not
So
sure if I pronounced it.
it's a One Piece reference.
Oh, okay.
So Roanoa Zorro is the first mate of the main character captain, who is notoriously bad at navigating.
Oh, right.
Yeah, basically, if you leave him on his own in a city, he'll get immediately lost, and it's a running joke to the extent where even the main characters are aware of it, where they're like, "Oh, where's Zorro's gone? Oh no, of course he's gotten lost." Yeah. So I think it would be the Fifth Doctor, because at least he's the captain and in charge of it. Zorro is the first mate who doesn't make those decisions. So it's the Fifth Doctor. Plus, you have loads of escapades and adventures on the way to Heathrow. Like you encounter the Cybermen and one of your best friends dies. Oh, maybe that's not good. So yeah. Oh, too soon. So yeah, it would be the Fifth Doctor. But of course, Jack is asking One Piece related questions. It's very on brand for him at the moment.
Yeah, certainly is.
I'm about 90 episodes in. I'm like 10% of the way through the series.
Yeah, I've heard it. There's a lot of stuff you've got to get through. Yeah,
Yeah, a lot of homework.
certainly. But to get through one more question, let's see. Okay, from Vincent. Do you think Heaven Sent could work with another Doctor? Also, do you have an episode that the fandom doesn't like, but you really do, or vice versa?
So the first question for the Heaven Sent one, that's a really interesting one, because stories like we mentioned it earlier, Midnight and Heaven Sent and a few others, the Caves of Androzani, are so like uniquely tied to those particular Doctors.
Yeah.
Like Peter Capaldi is such like an astonishingly talented actor that I'm unsure if any other Doctor would have been capable of carrying an episode like that on their own. So in terms of just sheer talent, it's very difficult to say. Like I love John Pertwee, but could he have carried a 17-minute episode of him monologuing in a castle? I'm not quite sure. Like
Yeah.
Hartnell, would he have remembered all the lines? I don't know. There's a lot of dialogue there, but I do love the thought experiment of it though. You've got I forget the last name, Theo, who was an artist in the Doctor Who community. They did a few videos on their YouTube channel of different actors doing the opening monologue to Heaven Sent. Like you've got Jonathan Carley, who's the Big Finish War Doctor, doing the Heaven Sent intro, but with the War Doctor. You've got John Culshaw, the famous impressionist, who's done one for the Fourth and the Third Doctor, etc., etc. So it's fun thought experiments, and hearing the Seventh Doctor voiced by Wink Taylor doing the if you know me, then you'll understand you're in so much danger right now. Wherever that monologue is from the beginning of Heaven Sent. I'm the Doctor. I'm coming to find you. I will never ever stop. But hearing that from different Doctors is a fun thought experiment. I'm not sure, because so much of that is tied to what the 12th Doctor has just experienced in Face the Raven. But it's a really fascinating question, and I would love to know if, like, the 13th Doctor, like, would Jodie Whittaker or Matt Smith, Eccleston, would they have been able to pull it off?
Yeah.
Yeah. But what was I've rambled so long. What was the second half of that question, sorry?
Also, do you have an episode that the fandom doesn't like, but you really do, or vice versa?
If anything, from the Doctor Who magazine poll that has been released over the past few months, it's probably the Rings of Akaten. There's something about the 11th Doctor era with that magazine poll where it seems like fans just have terrible taste, and my opinions are always right. I'm obviously joking, but yeah, that 11th Doctor poll is all over the shop, man. Like I love the Day of the Doctor, but I wouldn't say it's his best story
Yeah,
of the era.
certainly.
Let me just bring the poll up now. So yeah, Day of the Doctor's number 1. Then Vincent and the Doctor, then the 11th Hour, Pandora Opens, Doctor's Wife, etc. What on earth is Time of Angels and Flesh and Stone doing at number 6? Get some taste. But yeah, and stuff at the bottom is what you generally expect. Like Doctor Widow and the Wardrobe was the bottom, then Nightmare in Silver, Curse of the Blacks. But I generally agree with that. Although Doctor Widow and the Wardrobe is not that bad, is it? But yeah, Rings of Akaten being 34 out of 39. Come on, folks. What, like, because a lot of this has to do with the fact that I was not a big fan of the show during like series 7?
Yeah,
Rings,
seven
yeah,
B.
Rings of Akaten series 7. And I was just seeing so much of like Moffat attempting to be clever. Like I think I love Moffat as a writer, but I get the sense that his number 1 priority as a writer is to get the audience to acknowledge how smart that he is. And he is a very smart man, but I'm not sure if he's as smart as he thinks he is sometimes. And
Yeah,
even that, like, and he is very smart, of course. But and during that series, it was particularly egregious. And then Rings of Akaten comes along with a story with world building that I found genuinely interesting. It's the only story from that series that attempts to give Clara any sort of personality outside of witty, sexy nanny, and I think that, of course, it all revolves around Matt Smith yelling at a green screen at the end, but the performance is so strong. It's directed really well. I think is it Farron and Blackburn? Yeah, Neil Cross, who wrote that and also wrote Hyde. I think he really got a great sense on who the Doctor was and finding his voice for that particular series, and Matt
yeah.
Smith took the material and ran with it. So Rings of Akaten for me is probably the main outlier. But I'm wanting to do a video in the near future about what like the worst like rated stories on IMDb are and whether or not I actually agree with them. But I need to properly go through the list. But
Yeah, certainly.
yeah, Rings of Akaten is probably the standout, at least right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's an episode, to be fair, I actually haven't watched since it was broadcast. I don't know why. There's quite a few episodes, like The Girl Who Waited, I haven't either. And it's not because, oh, I hated them. It's just because, I don't know, I just never got around to it. But I always remember seeing, the clip on YouTube. It's, posted everywhere of, the 11th Doctor's speech, when he's, fighting the parasite god. I can't remember the name of the
Yeah, yeah.
creature. But such an iconic moment. I feel like that as well is one of the defining parts of the 11th Doctor's characterization as well. You
Yeah,
do feel like all of that pain, all of that suffering, it's kind of really showcased there as well.
yeah. So you go on the Doctor YouTube channel, and it is one of the most viewed moments. I think, or at least maybe it was. Maybe it's changed in the past couple of years.
Mm.
Like the most, I know it's number 3.
Okay.
It's on the YouTube channel, and then after that, it's the 11th Doctor meets the 10th Doctor from the Day of the Doctor. That's number 2,
Yeah.
and number 1 is Vincent Van Gogh Goes to the Gallery,
Oh,
which
okay.
has more than twice the amount of views as the second most watched. That's a massive ratio. But yeah, but going through that Doctor Magazine poll of 11th Doctor, I've got to close the tab because the more I look at it, the angrier I get. What is A Good Man Goes to War doing at number 16? What's wrong with you?
I know.
That's
It's
a nah,
very yeah, like as you said, you do question it. I mean, I haven't really kept up to date with any of the polling stuff from the Doctor Who magazine, but from the parts that I have seen, yeah, I have kind of been just like, but then again, it's what other people enjoy, I guess. You can't fault them too much, despite
yeah. I
certain
know.
tastes.
No, you can't, but I can. I will take those bullets. Okay, I will. I will absorb all the backlash to it.
Yeah, certainly. But thank you so much for coming on today, Will.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed this.
Yeah, it has been a lot of fun. We've pretty much spoken about everything to do with Doctor Who. We've really gone in depth. With New Who, Classic Who, controversies, Chaos in Cardiff, to Merch, Destroyed Cassandra, to the unit spin-off and stuff like that. It really has been great, mate. So thank you so much. And for those that are listening or watching, however you are consuming this podcast, thank you for your support, and let us know in the comment section, what did you think of this episode? And as well, let us know, did Mr. Tardis satisfy you with the debate answer? And you never know, you could be the one that makes him win this little competition. But thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye for now.
Goodbye. Thank you so much.